Emmett Hale was standing in the middle of his own kitchen, holding a letter that was not meant for him. His hands were steady. That was the strange part. A man reads something like that, something that turns every good memory into a lie, and you expect the hands to shake. But Emmett's hands had been through worse. They had loaded rifles in the dark, pulled shrapnel from his own leg, buried 2 friends in frozen ground outside Nashville. A letter was nothing compared to that. Except this letter was everything. It was addressed to Ada, the woman who had been sleeping in the room above his warehouse for 3 months. The woman who had just last night pressed her forehead against his chest and whispered that she was glad she came to this town. The woman who was standing right now in the doorway behind him, watching him raid the things she had hidden inside her suitcase since the day she arrived. The letter said in plain handwriting, "Miss Mercer, you were sent to obtain the deed. 3 months is long enough. If you have not secured it by month's end, I will come to Sutter's Bend myself and settle the matter without your help." Emmett set the letter on the table. He did not turn around. "How long?" he said. Ada did not answer. "How long have you been lying to me?" And now his hands shook. "But I am getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how they got here. How a woman with a terrible errand fell in love with the man she was sent to ruin. And how he, a man who trusted almost nobody, trusted her completely. It started 11 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday, with a steamboat and a brown suitcase. Sutter's Bend, Missouri was not the kind of town that appeared on maps. It sat on a muddy curve of the river, halfway between nowhere and slightly east of nowhere. There was a general store, a church with a crooked steeple, a blacksmith, and Emmett Hale's freight warehouse, which also served as the only place in town where a person could mail a letter or receive one. Emmett had built that warehouse with his own hands after the war. 4 walls, a tin roof, and a loading dock that leaned slightly to the left. It was not impressive, but it was his. The deed was in a tin box under his bed, and every night before he slept, some part of him was aware that it was there, that he owned something, that the war had not taken everything. He was 31 years old, lean from work and not from hunger anymore, and he had a habit of looking at people a beat too long before speaking. Most folks in Sutter's Bend had stopped trying to make conversation with him years ago. They did not dislike him. They simply understood that Emmett Hale preferred the company of silence, and they respected that the way you respect a fence. You do not climb it. You walk around. Ada Mercer stepped off the steamboat on a Tuesday afternoon in September. She was 27, dark-haired, and carried a brown suitcase that was heavier than it looked. She wore a gray dress that had been nice once and was now merely clean. She stood on the dock and looked at Sutter's Bend the way a doctor looks at a wound. Assessing, measuring. She had been sent here by a man named Prosser, Garrison Prosser, a creditor in St. Louis who claimed that Emmett Hale had stolen from him during the war, that Emmett had taken a land deed that rightfully belonged to Prosser's family and had used it to start his little freight business on stolen ground. Prosser wanted the deed. He had tried lawyers. He had tried the county office. Nothing worked. So he tried Ada. Ada owed Prosser money. A lot of it. Her late father's debts, transferred to her like a disease she could not cure. Prosser had offered a deal. Get the deed from Emmett Hale, and the debt disappears. Fail, and Prosser would sell the debt to a man in Chicago who collected in ways that did not involve courtrooms. So Ada was not here because she wanted to be. She was here because she had no other door left to open. She asked at the general store if there was a room to rent. The shopkeeper, a woman named Mrs. Greer, told her the only room available was the one above the freight warehouse. "You would have to ask Mr. Hale," Mrs. Greer said. "He does not usually rent it." "Does he not like people?" Ada asked. "He likes people fine," Mrs. Greer said. "He just does not like talking to them. Before I go on, do me a small favor. Hit that like button and tell me where you are listening from and what time it is." Even something that's simple helps this channel reach more people than you would think. I appreciate it. Ada knocked on the warehouse door at 5 in the afternoon. Emmett opened it, looked at her for a long moment and said nothing. She explained that she needed a room, that she was passing through, that she could pay weekly. Passing through to where, he asked. She had prepared an answer for this. Something about a cousin in Kansas. But standing in front of him, she forgot the cousin's fake name and said instead, "I have not decided yet." He studied her face the way he studied everything. Slowly, without hurry. "Rent is $2 a week," he said. "Stairs are on the outside. I work early. You will hear me." That was the entire negotiation. No questions about her past, no request for references. He handed her a key and went back inside. She stood on the dock holding it, thinking that this was going to be easier than she expected. She was wrong about that. The first week, Ada watched him. That was her job. Learn his routine, find the deed, take it, and leave. Simple. Except Emmett Hale did not have a routine that made anything simple. He woke before dawn, loaded freight until noon, ate alone at his table, worked again until dark, and then sat on the dock with a cup of coffee and stared at the river until the light was gone. He spoke to customers in short sentences. He did not drink. He did not gamble. He did not go to church. He did not seem to want anything at all except to be left alone with his work and his river. Ada had expected a thief. A man who had stolen a deed, she figured, would be rough, careless, the kind of man who takes what he wants and does not think twice. But Emmett was careful about everything. He measured flour before he cooked. He hung his coat on the same hook every night. He said thank you to the mule when it pulled the cart without complaint. He was, in every visible way, a decent man. That made it harder. On the 9th day, a crate slipped from the loading dock and nearly crushed her foot. Emmett moved faster than she had ever seen a man move. He grabbed her arm and pulled her back, and for a moment, his hand was on her waist and her face was close enough to see the scar on his jaw and the way his breath came fast. "You need to stay off the dock when I am loading," he said. "You need to warn people before you throw crates," she said. He almost smiled. She saw it. A flicker at the corner of his mouth, gone before it arrived. And something in her chest moved, just slightly, like a door pushed open by wind. She told herself it was nothing. By the 3rd week, they were eating supper together. It had not been planned. She had cooked one evening because she had nothing else to do, and made too much and brought a plate down to the warehouse. He accepted it without comment. The next night he set 2 places at his table. Neither of them acknowledged what that meant. They did not talk much at first, but the silence between them began to change. It stopped being the silence of strangers and became the silence of 2 people who were comfortable not filling every moment with sound. She noticed that he always poured her coffee before his own. He noticed that she read the same page of her book 3 times without turning it. One evening, he asked her what she was reading. She showed him. It was a volume of letters published after the war, written by soldiers to their wives. "Why do you read that?" he said. "Because they are honest," she said. Peoples are more honest in letters than in person. She regretted that sentence the moment it left her mouth, because she was not honest. Not with him. Not about any of it. A week later, the rain came. 3 days of it, heavy and constant, turning the roads into rivers and the river into something dangerous. Freight could not move. Emmett was stuck inside, and so was she. The warehouse felt smaller with both of them in it. On the 2nd night of rain, the roof above her room leaked. She came downstairs carrying her blanket, and he was sitting by the stove, reading. He looked up. She stood there, wet hair, bare feet, holding her blanket like a child who had lost her room. "Roof leaks," she said. "I know," he said. "It does that." He pulled a chair closer to the stove and draped a dry cloth over it. She sat down. Their knees were almost touching. She could feel the heat from the stove and the heat from him, and she was suddenly, painfully aware of both. "Emmett," she said. She did not know what she was going to say after his name. She just needed to say it. He looked at her, and whatever she saw in his face made her stop breathing for a moment. Not fear, not suspicion. Something softer than that. Something she had no right to receive. "You should sleep," he said, quietly. "I will fix the roof when it clears." She did not sleep. She lay awake by the stove, listening to the rain, and thought about the deed in the tin box under his bed, and the letter from Mercer in her suitcase, and the fact that she had not looked for the deed in 6 days and had not wanted to. That was the night she knew she was in trouble. 3 days later, a letter arrived from Mercer. She opened it with cold fingers behind the warehouse where Emmett could not see. The words were short. "I have heard nothing from you. I expected results by now. Do not make me come to that town myself." She folded the letter and put it back in her suitcase, under the false bottom, next to the original instructions Mercer had given her in St. Louis. She should have left that night, taken whatever she could carry, and disappeared onto the next steamboat. That would have been the smart thing, the safe thing. Instead, she went downstairs and helped Emmett sort freight. He handed her a manifest, and their fingers touched, and she did not pull away. Neither did he. They stood like that for a moment, a piece of paper between them and nothing else. "Ada," he said. "Yes?" He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the manifest. "This shipment is wrong," he said. That was not what he was going to say. They both knew it. The following week, Emmett asked her to help him deliver a shipment upriver. 3 hours in a flatboat, just the two of them. She sat at the bow, and he worked the oar, and she caught him watching her more than once. Not suspicious watching. The other kind. The kind where a man's eyes go soft and he looks away a half-second too late. On the way back, the current pushed them into a low branch, and the boat tilted hard. She grabbed his arm. He grabbed the gunwale. The boat steadied, but she did not let go of his arm. Her fingers stayed there, on the inside of his forearm, where the skin was warm and she could feel his pulse. Fast. Faster than a man pulling an oar should need. "You can let go," he said. "I know," she said. She let go. But slowly, and she felt him exhale as her fingers slid away, like he had been holding his breath the entire time. That night, she wrote a letter to Mercer. She sat on her bed with the paper on her knee and wrote 4 words. "I need more time." She did not explain why. She sealed it and mailed it the next morning through Emmett's own freight counter, and the irony of that was not lost on her. Sending a letter about destroying a man through the man's own business. Using his trust to buy time to betray him. But she could not stop. Mercer was not a patient man, and the debt was real, and she had no other way out. Not yet. Not unless she could think of something before the river froze and the steamboat stopped running. On a Sunday morning in November, Emmett kissed her. They were on the dock. The sun was low and gold on the water, and she had said something about the light, and he turned to her and put his hand on the side of her face and kissed her like a man who had been thinking about it for weeks and had finally run out of reasons not to. She kissed him back, and everything Mercer had asked her to do became impossible in that moment. You cannot steal from a man whose mouth is on yours and whose hand is trembling against your jaw. You cannot ruin someone who tastes like coffee and river air and second chances. She decided then. She would not take the deed. She would find another way to pay Mercer. She would tell Emmett everything, and he would either forgive her or he would not. But she would not lie to him for one more day. She planned to tell him that evening. She did not get the chance. That afternoon, while Ada was at the general store, Emmett went upstairs to fix the window latch in her room. He had been meaning to do it for weeks. The latch was stuck, and he needed a thin piece of metal to work it loose. He looked in her suitcase for a hairpin. He found the false bottom instead. Inside were 2 letters. The original instructions from Prosser, dated June, which laid out the entire plan. And the recent letter, the one that said he was coming. Emmett read them both, standing in the room where she slept, in the building he had built with his hands, on the land that someone had sent her to take from him. There is a kind of pain that does not arrive all at once. It comes in waves. The first wave is disbelief. The second is understanding. The third, the worst, is the memory of every tender moment replayed through the lens of betrayal. Every supper, every silence, every touch. Was any of it real? When Ada came back from the store, she found him in the kitchen with the letter on the table. And that is where this story began. With his hands shaking, and her standing in the doorway, and the distance between them wider than the river. "How long?" he asked again. "Since the beginning," she said. He nodded, slowly, like a man absorbing a blow. "Was any of it true?" he said. And Ada, who had lied to him from the first day, who had lied about her reason for coming, her cousin in Kansas, every motive she had ever given him, said the only honest thing she had left. All of it, every single night. Every word at that table. That was true. He did not answer. He walked past her, through the door, down to the dock. She heard his boots on the wood. Then silence. Then the river. She stood in the kitchen alone and understood that she had done the worst thing a person can do. Not the stealing. She had never taken the deed. The worst thing was making a good man believe he had been foolish to trust. 2 days passed. Emmett slept in the warehouse. Ada stayed in her room. They did not speak. The town noticed. Mrs. Greer asked Ada if something was wrong. Ada said nothing. On the 3rd morning, a man stepped off the steamboat. He was well-dressed, thin, and walked like he owned whatever ground was under his feet. Garrison Prosser had come to Sutter's Bend. He found Ada on the dock. His first words were, "Where is the deed?" "I do not have it," she said. Prosser studied her face the way a man studies a tool that has stopped working. "Then I will get it myself," he said. He walked into the warehouse without knocking. Emmett was behind the counter, stacking manifests. Prosser introduced himself. He spoke calmly. He explained that the land belonged to his family, that Emmett's deed was fraudulent, that he had documentation to prove it. Emmett listened. Then he said, "I bought this land from the county office in 1866. The sale is recorded. If you have a claim, take it to a judge." Prosser smiled. "I was hoping we could avoid that." He leaned forward. "I know about the woman upstairs, Mr. Hale. I sent her. She has been reporting to me for 3 months. Everything you told her, every detail about your business, your finances, your habits. She works for me." He said it to wound. And it worked. Emmett looked at Prosser for a long time. Then he looked past him, through the open door, to where Ada was standing on the dock. She had heard everything. Her face was white. "Get out of my warehouse," Emmett said. Prosser did not leave town. He checked into the room above the general store and spent the next 2 days talking to anyone who would listen. He told the barber that Emmett's land was stolen. He told the blacksmith that the deed was forged. He told Mrs. Greer that the woman living above the warehouse was a thief he had hired, and that both of them were criminals. He filed a formal complaint at the county seat and paid a lawyer in Jefferson City to draft a challenge to the deed. Sutter's Bend was a small town. Small towns listen. By the 2nd day, people were crossing the street to avoid Emmett the way they used to, and Ada could feel the stares again, worse than before. That evening, Ada came to the warehouse door. Emmett was inside, sitting at the table where they used to eat together. She stood in the doorway, the same doorway from 3 days ago, and said the only thing she could think of that might matter. "He is lying about the deed, Emmett. I read his papers in St. Louis. He has no real claim. He was counting on me to steal the physical deed so he could file it as his own. Without it, your recorded sale blocks him. That is why he needed me. That is why he is desperate now. Emmett did not look up. "I did not take it," she said. "I could have. Twice. I chose not to." "Why?" he said. "Because I fell in love with the man who pours my coffee before his own." The room was quiet for a long time. The stove ticked. The river moved outside. Somewhere a dog barked and stopped. Emmett stood up. He walked to the door. He stopped close enough that she could feel his breath, and he looked at her the way he looked at everything. Slowly, without hurry, like a man deciding whether to rebuild something that had been broken. "If you are lying now," he said, "I will not recover from it." "I am not lying now," she said. He reached out and took her hand. Not gently, not carefully. He took it the way a man grabs a rope when he is falling, and she held on with both of hers. The next morning, Emmett walked into the county office with his deed, his bill of sale, and the tax receipts from 3 years. The clerk confirmed every document was genuine and recorded. Emmett asked the clerk to put that in writing. He did. Then Emmett went to the sheriff. He brought the clerk's letter, Prosser's written instructions to Ada, and the formal complaint Prosser had filed. The sheriff read all of it, slowly, and then looked up. "This man sent someone to steal your deed," the sheriff said. "And now he is defaming you to the whole town based on a claim the county says does not exist." "That is correct," Emmett said. The sheriff paid Prosser a visit that afternoon. He brought 2 deputies. He explained that filing a fraudulent claim against a recorded deed was a crime in the state of Missouri, and that hiring someone to steal legal documents was another. He offered Prosser a choice: the next steamboat or a cell. Prosser chose the steamboat. But before he left, he stood on the dock and looked at Ada one last time. His face was calm, the face of a man who had lost a hand of cards but still believed he owned the table. "You will regret this," he said. "No," she said. "I will not." He boarded the boat without another word. The river carried him south, and Sutter's Bend did not hear from Garrison Prosser again. I have been thinking about something while telling you this story, about how trust works. People say trust is hard to build and easy to break, and that is true. But what they do not say enough is that trust, real trust, is a choice you make after the breaking, not before. Anyone can trust before they have been hurt. The brave ones are the people who trust after. If that reached you, tell me in the comments. Was it the letter? The rain? The moment she said all of it? Every comment you leave helps this channel grow and keeps these stories coming. Thank you for staying until the end. Ada stayed in Sutter's Bend, not in the room above the warehouse. Emmett would not allow that. He said if she was staying properly. He cleared out the back room of the warehouse, built a wall, hung a door, and put a window in it that faced the river. It was small. It was not much, but it was hers, and it was next to his, and that mattered more than the size of it. They did not rush. They had already moved too fast in some ways and too slow in others, and they both understood that what came next needed to be built without shortcuts. She helped with the freight business. He taught her how to read a manifest and negotiate with steamboat captains. She taught him that silence is fine, but sometimes a person needs to hear the words out loud. On a cold evening in December, she was standing at the stove, stirring something, and he came in from the dock, smelling like river water and pine. He stood behind her and put his arms around her waist. She leaned back into him. Neither of them spoke. The stove crackled. The river moved. And the room felt for the first time since she had arrived like it belonged to both of them. Some people find love in easy places. In churches, at dances, through letters that tell the truth from the first word. Emmett and Ada did not get that. They found love in the wreckage of a lie, and they built it anyway, board by board, day by day. The way you build anything worth keeping in a place like Sutter's Bend, Missouri. Slowly, with your hands, and with the full knowledge that the river might rise again, But this time, you are not standing on the bank alone.